All right, in this video today, we are going to spend some time looking at what it means to appeal to a specific audience in writing, as well as what it means to develop your ideas for an audience. Both are very important concepts that are going to play a significant role in what we are doing in A2. So at this point in the course, you will have been introduced to the rhetorical situation. You'll have had some time to consider the way in which audience shapes your writing. And as you've moved into Unit 2, you'll likely have begun to brainstorm stakeholders who are invested in your problem, as well as think about which specific stakeholder would be the most logical and exigent one to choose as your audience based on your specific purpose. However, the work doesn't stop there. Once you've chosen your specific audience, you need to begin to think about how you are going to appeal specifically to this group based on what you know and can assume about them. So this is where we're going to pick up today with these notes. During this video, make sure that you're taking the time to jot down the most important ideas so that you can reference them in class and when you are writing your own proposal. Feel free to stop and review it at any time if you need to. So just to start us off here, I have two images of two very different audiences, likely with two very different sets of expectations. As such, we can assume that the text that is being delivered is going to differ greatly. In order for the author to be successful, it's going to be important that they have some awareness of their audience's expectations, desires, and values. For instance, if the audience that was expecting to watch an old black and white movie were suddenly asked to sit through and experience a very loud rock concert, there would be some obvious frustration because the author would not have correctly read their audience. So this is ultimately why understanding and reading your audience becomes so important. So what is it that you need to know? I should note that some of this is going to be based on assumptions that you will make. For the purposes of rhetorical writing, this can be okay, as long as we are aware that these are our assumptions. We can make some guesses about how our audience will respond without declaring that everyone within a specific group is going to feel the exact same way or value the exact same thing. So let's begin by considering some of the specifics, starting with age. Do they have kids? Are they just starting college? Are they in their mid-30s? Are they retiring? Do they play bingo at the senior center? Age, I think, is a great example. I would likely speak differently to a 13-year-old than I would to someone in their mid-30s, even if I were delivering the same exact message. I might use different idioms, different references, different languages. We often make these choices intuitively when we're speaking to different audiences, but it's important that we're aware of how we might be more intentional about this in our writing. Education level. Are they college graduates? Are they college students who have experienced some college? Are they someone who's firmly rooted in academia? Or are they perhaps someone who left school at a young age? And how does that understanding of this group's education level shape and change the way in which you enact your message? Economic status. Is this group of people a group of people that tend to be rolling in the dough? Are they living paycheck to paycheck? Are they somewhere in between? An example of this, if I were a politician and I were giving a speech to a group of unemployed working class civilians, I might not make a reference to the booming economy. I need to think about how my audience is going to interpret and understand my ideas. Along the same lines or similar lines, political, social, religious beliefs. Is this group conservative, liberal, centrist, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu? And how does our understanding of this worldview shape the way in which we enact our message to this particular audience? Another thing that you'll need to consider as you are shaping your proposal is the level of information that your audience has about the subject. Does the reader already know a lot about this topic, or do they know very little about it? What can you assume in terms of their level of information? If they already know a lot, you're probably going to need to spend less time on the basics. If they don't, you definitely want to spend some more time on the basics so that you're not going over their head. A lot of times, one of the things that can happen if we know a whole lot about our topic or our problem is that we assume that our audience knows the same things that we do. So having a really clear understanding of what our audience might know or not know is going to help us be more effective in getting our message across. Do the readers already have strong opinions about this topic? If they do, you want to be careful so that you're not alienating or offending your reader, particularly if your opinion differs or if there's a chance that your opinion might differ from that of your audience. The third thing that you want to consider is values. The author should always consider what the audience values and think about how they can appeal to that. So, does the audience value freedom of speech, privacy, academic freedom, financial security? If you have chosen a specific stakeholder for your audience, you should be able to make some assumptions about what that group values. Having a sense of these values is going to help you better reach your audience. For instance, if you can assume that your audience cares very deeply about the environment, then you can find a way to use that value and appeal to that value in your proposal. So as a final note, the author should think about who will read their text before they write it, while they write it, and adjust their text to help their reader understand it. So in summary, you want to continually be thinking about who you are writing to as you are writing this proposal. So that pretty much wraps up our notes on writing to a specific audience. The other thing that we're going to talk about today is development, as development and audience are very closely linked. You'll notice that part of the hierarchy of rhetorical concerns includes a section entitled Development for Audience, and this is on everyone's assignment sheet. So these two pieces are very closely linked. In class, we'll look at the way in which a particular author develops his ideas. These notes are going to take us a step further by helping you consider how you will develop your ideas in your proposal. So as a quick review, in this course when we talk about development, we're talking about how writers choose to elaborate on their main ideas in their writing. What does development look like in a proposal? It generally includes two components, evidence and explanation. Your evidence might include quotations from experts, statistics, facts, graphs, charts, photos, or other images. In Unit 1, we talked about the way in which evidence tends to be these more specific types of information that ultimately support the larger and broader concepts. So having evidence is going to be very important in your proposal, but it's not enough just to include that evidence. You have to explain it clearly for your reader and help the reader know how to understand it. While the evidence is drawn from the text, the explanation of that evidence is drawn from you and your own thinking. So the explanation piece is where your own ideas come into play. So what does this kind of development look like? We're going to take a minute to run through a quick example. Below we see an author using evidence in order to develop the problem section of their proposal. So we see that this author is writing about the lack of farmers in the agriculture sector today, and he's using a Mark Bittman article to support his ideas. Mark Bittman writes in Let's Help Create More Farmers, published in the New York Times, just about everyone agrees that we need more farmers. Currently, nearly 30% are 65 or older, and fewer than 10% are under 35. The number of farmers is likely to fall further with continuing consolidation and technological innovation. This becomes a problem because without a steady amount of new farmers learning agricultural practices, there will be an extremely low number of farmers in the generations to come. This will have detrimental economic impacts on the United States economy, along with inability to provide food for the growing world population. So we see here that this author not only takes the time to introduce the author, the article, and the piece of evidence so that the audience has a clear sense of where that is coming from, where the evidence is coming from. He also takes the time to explain how this piece of evidence ultimately connects to the problem in his proposal and supports his own ideas. How are development and synthesis similar? This is where the synthesis comes into play. You're working with your ideas, but you're also working with evidence. You will develop your ideas throughout your paper by providing evidence and explanation. When you explain your problem, explain why your problem is exigent, and explain why your solution is a good one. So you want to make sure that you're hitting all of these pieces in your proposal, that you're using evidence, and that you're also using your own ideas in order to develop your evidence and connect them to the various pieces of your proposal. Lastly, how is development connected to audience? So we've talked now about the idea of writing to a specific audience, and we've talked about what it means to develop your audience. So now let's think a little bit about how these two things are connected. Based on your audience's needs, values, knowledge, etc., you provide evidence and explanation and shape them for your particular audience using audience appeals. So this is why development and audience are so closely linked. In order to get your point across, it's important that you fully develop your ideas and explain them, but it's also just as important that you think about the specific needs and expectations of your audience. Being intentional about the evidence you use, the way you develop it, and the way in which you appeal to your audience will ultimately help you to write a more successful and effective proposal.